Good day, everyone. One of the most important elements of a drama is the plot, for it gives you a clear view of what happens in the story. So for today, we will discuss the plot and its elements, presenting to you the plot diagram. First, let's define plot. Plot is the organized pattern or sequence of events that make up a story. Every plot is made up of a series of related events. What are these related events? Let's see the plot diagram. First, we have the antecedent action, exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, denouement or falling action, and lastly, the resolution or conclusion. So we start with where the plot begins. And this is through the antecedent action, exposition, inciting incident, and rising action. What is antecedent action? Before the story begins, there is a backstory. This is needed by the audience to understand reasons for future events. This is alluded to and sometimes explained in the exposition. So in the story, what is the antecedent action? Let's look at the initial situation. Willie and Biff are both home again. Willie comes home early from his work trip because he is no longer able to drive and he can't do his job. Biff is home after working as a farmhand for many years in the West. But with the contrasting seeds of conflict buried here, this initial situation isn't bound to last long. Next, we have the exposition. It is usually near the beginning of any story. The characters are introduced, setting is described, antecedent action is communicated, the main conflict or inciting incident is presented, and the story. Who are the characters? We have Willie Loman, Biff Loman, Linda Loman, Happy Loman, Charlie, Bernard, Ben. Of course, the woman, Howard Wagner, Stanley, Jenny, Miss Forsyth, and Letta. What about the setting? In the year 1941, in New York City. Today is the present, daydreams from the past, and the requiem that takes place at Willie's funeral. Next, we have the inciting incident. This usually occurs at the end of the exposition. This is the event that causes the protagonist to set goals and leads to the future events in the plot. And of course, not to forget the rising action. This part of the story begins to develop the conflicts. A building of interest or suspense occurs. Let's see the rising action in the story. Willie is deteriorating and suicidal. Biff is told to get seriously. For Willie's mental wanderings are getting worse. He is preoccupied with Biff's aimlessness and inability to find success in business. Linda informs her sons that Willie has been trying to commit suicide and tells Biff that his father's life is in his hands. Biff needs to get a job and get serious or take the blame for his father's actions. Next, as we go through, Willie gets fired and Biff doesn't even get close enough to a job to get fired. On the same day, both Willie's and Biff's high expectations are dashed to the ground. Willie goes to his boss, Howard, to try to get a non-traveling job, but ends up getting completely fired. Meanwhile, Biff waits for 6 hours to see Oliver, only to be reminded that he is a nobody in the man's eyes. As if that were not complicated enough, Biff steals Oliver's fountain pen. Next, we go through the middle of the plot, and that is the climax. What is a climax? This is the turning point of the story. Usually, the main character faces conflict, and the main character will change in some ways. The story. Biff gets honest and destroys Willie's dream, and Willie finally realizes that Biff loves him. This climax earns its stripes in two different ways. The first is psychological. Biff realizes he and his entire family have been living a lie. The second is more of an action-based climax and takes the form of a huge blowout argument between Biff and his father. This is followed by much shouting and crying, and at last Willie finds out that Biff really does love him. That would be great, and would probably have a happy ending if it weren't for the small fact that we haven't gotten to the suspense stage yet. So here's the suspense in the story. It's still a part of the climax. Willie starts chatting with the imaginary figure of his brother and considers killing himself. Now that Willie has realized that Biff loves him, he wants to do anything he possibly can to make his son successful. So in his mind, Willie hears Ben saying that the jungle is dark but full of diamonds. The suspense, of course, is that we've heard this suicide song and dance before, so we are not sure if he will actually go through it. This suspense is heightened by the fact that Willie's family is in bed thinking everything's fine, which we all know in any movie, play, or work of literature means horrible things are coming soon. So where the plot ends, it includes the denouement, the falling action, the resolution or conclusion, and the moral. Let's proceed to the denouement or the falling action. All loose ends of the plot are tied up and additional conflict is resolved. In the story, let us see how it is resolved. Willie commits suicide. And now for the horrible things. Willie's death was actually a foregone conclusion. The play's title and Linda both predict it. What was unsure earlier in the play was why Willie would commit suicide, and the why, as we have discussed, is the real kicker. The resolution or the conclusion. Here, the story comes to a reasonable ending, and the major conflict is settled. What is the resolution or conclusion in the story? Biff rejects his father's misguided dream, but Happy runs with it. At the conclusions of the play, it is totally clear that Willie was wrong about himself. Not that we ever thought otherwise, but practically no one comes to his funeral. Biff now realizes that his father did not know himself and picked the wrong path. He will certainly not follow in his father's footsteps. Happy, on the other hand, defends his father's misguided dreams and decides to take them on himself. So, let's have a recap. First, in the plot diagram, we have the antecedent action, exposition, rising incident, inciting incident rising action, climax, denouement or falling action, resolution, and of course, the moral. Putting it all together, antecedent action, exposition, inciting incident, rising action are all part of the beginning of the story, the climax in the middle of the story, and of course, the denouement or falling action and resolution at the end of the story. So that's all for the elements of the plot. I hope you have learned something. Thank you!